Hopefully, you'll had an opportunity to take a look at the few pages of the preview document, if you like, which was taken from the webinar to give you a feel for One Voice, One Hope and the proposal that we put forward so far as the Jordan legacy. But today is really all about having a discussion around this piece to get your views. And I'll talk about the structure of the session today in just a moment. But there once again is our list of the good and the great attending today's session. Really pleased you could all be here. The challenge that we face is not lost, I think, to any of us, really. We have in this room today a group of pretty amazing people doing amazing things, undoubtedly saving lives. The reality is we've got a complex situation to deal with as far as suicide prevention is concerned. There's a wide range of socioeconomic issues that can be affected by suicide, but also we can be effective in helping to prevent. But the challenge is that despite everything that we're doing right now, the numbers are increasing. And I think for the longest time myself, I've kind of looked at this and said, well, what can we do to influence that change? And One Voice, One Hope was something I started to look at in the spring and summer and do research on community networks to really try and answer that question for myself initially, then start to share that with others. But I think there's two or three questions I think we need just to consider, not to be answered. These are kind of rhetorical questions here. But to consider here is, I'm sorry, I've just got a little bit of echo coming from somebody at the moment. It might be my voice reverberating. So I'm just going to suggest we go on mute just for now, just in case it's me coming back through a speaker, but then we'll obviously open up the conversation as we get going. So there's three questions really I wanted to pose just for us to think about in the background really through this process. Is there a need for a national collaborative community network? It's a question that's been thrown out to me through this process. And do such communities already exist? And do we simply need to be more aware or make better use of those communities and networks? And ultimately, if we decide that there is a need for a collaborative community network, could such a network for suicide prevention help drive change more quickly? So there's some of the background questions maybe just to think about as we go through this process. Now, since the webinar that we hosted back in September this year, we've had some huge feedback, really positive feedback, and people say, yes, we do need more effective collaboration to take place in this space, and it's the way forward. I mean, lots of language of that type. So what is the vision, just as a quick reminder, just in case you've not had an opportunity to look through the pre-event document? It's a national community network is what I've called it, made up of individual community network groups, which I'll come on to in a moment. I put in brackets free to join because some of your feedback from today may be, well, how on earth are you going to do this if it's free to join? Maybe it's got to be funded. I'm having conversations with people in the US at the moment who set up community networks of this nature on a subscription model, for example. But my ideal world, my ideal vision would be it would be a free to join network. It would be a framework that would enable members to network locally or nationally and come together for both virtual or physical events. Those could be conferences, they could be regional events, they could be online, they could be a mix of frequent networking rather than necessarily just attending training or specific events of that nature. The aims really would be to provide a network for members to be able to share stories, to share knowledge and resources through these physical and virtual hookups and through other means as well. Last week's group, for example, felt that a website was really important where all those resources could all come together in one place, for example. It would be a framework for members to collaborate on specific suicide prevention related action-centered projects. And I think action is really important here because the individual community network groups I referred to in that first bullet point at the top would probably set to and work on very specific projects. And give you an example, very recently I was meeting with the CEO of a tech firm that works in education around really, I suppose, suicide prevention and mental health. But what their software does, they're part of a large network of 10 other organizations globally with a head office in Australia. They work predominantly in the UK and the US to monitor chat and website conversations within schools. They've been doing this for some time and have some quite fascinating but troubling data as well, of course. So my conversation with that CEO was, okay, so how familiar are you with Ripple suicide prevention? And Alice Hendy and the team. And the response was, well, I think I've heard of them. And I said, well, how familiar are you with Ian Russell and the Molly Russell Foundation and the work that they're doing in terms of the online harms bill? And again, the response was, well, I think I'm familiar with them. And my question is, why aren't these people all in the same room, working collectively instead of working so hard, chasing individual funding as well, where to pull those brains and resources together, maybe for campaigning purposes, maybe just to work on very specific projects within schools, alongside those working in education at the moment, like Andy, Mike, and Tim, and Nina Smith and others. Why can't we collaborate more specifically on very specific projects? It's about, as well, for me, providing a framework of support for those of us working in the suicide prevention space. And it's a real shame that Jake from the Hub of Hope and Chasing the Stigma isn't here, because it was a conversation that he and I had earlier this year where he looked at the Hub of Hope and how well that was working at the moment. And I think some 14,000 organizations now subscribe to that and share their resources and support on that site. He has a team of, I think it's about 14 to 15 people, if not more now, working there. And he said that's working very well for people who are struggling, who want to reach out and find support within their own postcode areas. What Jake said, he said, what I'm looking for now is, can I create a similar model for those working in suicide prevention and mental health, so they've got some areas of support? And that's really what prompted the conversation that I had with Jake, which I think must have been back in March or April. So what kind of support is there for us? I've lost track of how many people I've spoken to this week alone who are talking about their CIC or their charity, and they're using the word tired. They're using the word tired a lot. It's a real hard slog for many of them, very often doing this alone. And yet, as Sam and Ellie will know, we come together for fantastic events such as the Solace Empowerment Conference in Blackpool just a few weeks ago. And the buzz and the kind of love and the feeling that everyone has during those sessions is really something that we should bottle. But then we all go back. We go back to our desks. We go back to our regular lives in terms of what we're trying to do individually. And I think it's really about enabling all those who don't usually have their voices heard to become part of the solution, but at scale. I think we've got a lot of work to do in that area, particularly, which is why, following the webinar, one of the biggest responses that I got back was from grassroots charities and CICs and the smaller organizations saying, you know, we just either don't get a seat at the big table or we just don't get our voices heard when we're there. So that was kind of the vision that we've laid out. And what today's session really is all about is kind of starting that conversation now with people like yourselves to say, is this viable? Is this needed? And if so, what kind of structure will that take? And there'll be a bit of follow-up from today and an action plan, nothing too arduous for you, but something I'll share with you. For me as well, and others that I've spoken to, I think it's about guiding principles. How do you make such a community work? I think it's about respect for one another. I think that's really important. It is about humility, not always easy. I hear the term ego used a lot, often in relation to the bigger charities. One of the things, hopefully, Rosie, you won't mind me mentioning this, but I'm delighted that Rosie's here from the NSPA, because we've been having really positive conversations and challenging conversations about the need for this and how can we really collaborate. And this network is as much about highlighting the great work that the NSPA does as it is about the grassroots charities as well. But we've got to do that with respect and humility and got to have trust in there as well. I think that's really important. I think the overriding guiding principle, of course, is compassion. There are going to be times where we don't agree. on lots of things, may not agree on what we talk about today in the breakout sessions very shortly. But I think we have to do it with a degree of compassion here, or a lot of compassion, and just recognize that pretty well all of us on this session today have lost someone to suicide or been impacted by suicide in some way. And I think we mustn't ever lose track of that. I think we're all trying to do the best job we can do with the tools we have available to us at the moment, as someone said to me just the other day. So I kind of hope that's useful in terms of positioning everything again for discussion, because what I'd like to do is in a moment or two just break out into breakout sessions, and just I think we'll go with 3 groups actually to keep them reasonably small. And I'd like you to discuss a framework that I'll share with you in a moment. I'm delighted Professor Lisa Edwards is with us today. I've known Lisa for some while, and she shared with me a few weeks ago when we met for coffee the COM-B framework. So we're getting very technical now, but I want to share that framework with you. I know I have shared it within the preview document, but Lisa recommended this to me, and Lisa, by the way, is a lecturer at the Faculty of Health Studies at the University of Bradford, and Lisa lost her son David to suicide in 2016. But she just felt this might be a really useful framework for us to start the discussion around One Voice, One Hope. So I'll share that framework with you in a moment, and just ask you in your individual groups to have a discussion around that particular model. We'll do that for about 25 minutes or so, something like that. Then I'll bring you all back. If I could ask each of the groups just to just choose a spokesperson, and then what we'll do is we'll kind of just feed back your initial thoughts. And then what I will do is I'll send you individually this COM-B framework in a very simple spreadsheet. I'm not that bright, not that clever, not that technical. That over the coming weeks, you can maybe just fill in some personal feedback based around today's session using that framework. And what I will then do is commit to pulling all that together by the end of the year and summarizing it all for you to say, right, well, this is what we think so far from those we've spoken to in these framework builder sessions. So that's a brief introduction. I can see all sorts of chat going on. Oh, good, you're sharing details with each other. Fabulous, well done. I knew I'd chosen the right group today. So let me just move one slide forward. And what is this COM-B model? Now, Lisa will probably mark my homework here, by the way, so hopefully I've got this somewhere close, Lisa. But I think everything I've just shared with you, I'd like you to kind of pull it apart into these 4 areas, really. And COM-B, as you can see, stands for capability, opportunity, motivation, and behavior. For capability, as far as creating this national collaborative network, what skills, abilities, and attitudes are going to be required to make this work? You know, what is going to be important? There's no right or wrong answers here, by the way. Whatever you think in your discussion groups and want to feedback, I'll certainly make a note of, and then you can add to the personal feedback later. From an opportunity point of view, that includes physical opportunities. What kind of infrastructure would be required to make this work? You know, will we need funding? How would we support the members? Do we need a website, as has already been discussed? What kind of infrastructure would be required? When I looked at motivation, I thought, well, that's pretty straightforward, isn't it? We all want to reduce the number of suicides and get them down from the 6,000 plus we're seeing every year and have done for 16 years in the UK. But I thought about this question. I thought, what kind of positive motivators would encourage people to want to join this? And then when they join, what would be really important, the positive motivators to make them want to stay? I'm familiar with a number of different networking groups that have been set up, and some have worked really, really well. Others have struggled to remain sustainable. And often one of the reasons, and this has been shared with me as well, is that it's left to one leader or one person to make this network operate. And as soon as that person is unwell or they're not able to continue, everything comes to a grinding halt, and we just have a list of members on a website. But what would have to happen to encourage people to want to join and stay? Okay, here's the big one. What are the negative emotions? What could hinder the success of such a community network? What attitudes, beliefs, lack of diversity, prejudices, those kind of things? What do we need to maybe consider? And a lot of the first two, capability and opportunity, and motivation, I suppose, will determine the behaviors of the network, and will influence them. What is important, do you feel, about the behavior of One Voice, One Hope as a community? That's quite a big question, isn't it, to answer there. So there's some thoughts. I'm going to come out of the share for a moment, because that's enough PowerPoint from me. Let me get rid of the slides. Hopefully we're out of share. Stop share, Steve. That's how you do it. Okay, that's good. Audio wasn't technical. So I hope that was useful as an intro. And what I will do before we go into the breakout groups is just kind of open up the mics for a moment or two. We're doing well for time, and just see if there's any, how confident you feel about breaking out into those groups to kind of have that discussion. So I think this is a good opportunity for any of you to say, no idea what you're talking about, Steve. Can you just clarify a couple of points for me there? So yeah, just feel free if anyone's got a kind of query or a question at this point before we go off into the breakout groups.
Sorry, I didn't put my hand up, Steve.
That's all right, Angela. Yeah.
My initial query, and this is without actually knowing what the Suicide Prevention Alliance does, is understanding the difference between what the Suicide Prevention Alliance does and what this would do, because in terms of infrastructure, pulling people together, there does seem to be a bit of overlap, but I'm sure that you've considered that. So
yeah, and Rosie and I know Rosie's there in conference at the moment, and but we've had an initial meeting, haven't we, Rosie, to kind of explore this and said, you know, this is one of the things we need to look at. Where are the overlaps? Because there's no point reinventing the wheel. You know, if part of what One Voice, One Hope is about is better highlighting the work that the NSPA does, then that's part of what we do. So I think there's a lot of discussion to look at that. And in fact, Rosie, you challenged me, didn't we, when we spoke last time? Said, well, what do you think we do? I thought, oh, right, I'm a member. And I said, well, you do training workshops, you hold conferences, you campaign on behalf of us all with government. And then I think I was scratching around a little bit, wasn't I, Rosie? But you know, you made a really valid point. You know, that if the members aren't quite sure, then maybe there's a piece of communication there to be done. So yeah, so Rosie and myself have been having really constructive conversations around this, and that's why I asked one of those three earlier questions, Angela, to say, you know, well, essentially we don't want to reinvent the wheel. If we've got something that's perfectly workable there, is this something else alongside that? So I think lots of discussion to be had before we move forward, but thank you for raising that. It's really, really important. Any other thoughts or questions there? Ellie?
I never know how to do the tap on this. I get the impression this is more collaborative. I don't know why. I just do. I don't feel like this is the same as the NSPA. Yeah, I don't know why.
I hear what you're saying. I think there'd be a lot of people who argue that in many ways, of course, the NSPA has been one of the few collaborative organizations out there at the moment. But I think I know where you're going with this. Like, I've used the word network really quite deliberately.
I think that's what I feel like it possibly might be.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting.
Or maybe definitely. Yeah, that's what I feel like, looking to see where it goes to. Do you know what I mean? So yeah.
The other difference, of course, is the NSPA are well established, and this is a vision at the moment. So
of course, yeah.
Rosie, you got a question? You got your hand up?
Yeah, no, well, it wasn't a question. I hope you don't mind me coming in with a comment, and I apologise. I was anticipating getting away from a conference sooner than and I wasn't able to, so I've stayed here. and I just haven't been able to find great space. So apologies for kind of noise and things. But I think, Steve, I agree with everything that you've said. And, as you say, we've had conversations about how this might be different from the NSPA. I think I would be open today to sort of thinking about some of what you're proposing. Is it, and I don't want to kind of take up lots of the time kind of talk, for talking about your proposal, Steve, but some of the things in there I know are like groups around specific themes and trying to bring people together around specific issues. They are things that we've done in the past. I guess my comment is that perhaps there are ways that we can be developing as an alliance that kind of meets the needs and speaks to some of the issues that you're raising. And I'll put myself on mute again now, but I think I feel like maybe there's a conversation about what we can be, how we can develop the NSPA, and actually maybe sharing some of what we've learned and what we know from other groups that have existed.
Thank you, Rosie. No, that would be great. I think it's really important we have these conversations. So thank you for that input. Carolyn.
Hi.
Sorry, I always get it right. Caroline or Carolyn?
Caroline.
Caroline, right.
Don't worry, that's
50-50 chance.
Let me put my hand down. This is a question that might make me sound a bit silly, but I'm quite new to this scene and I have been kind of bombarded with a lot of these different groups and I'm not entirely sure where they overlap. But I just wanted to ask a question of Rosie while you're here. I became a member of SASP, which seems to be another big group. How do they fit into the equation in one sentence? Because I know we've got other stuff to do.
Yeah, great. We've got a couple of more minutes, we'll do the breakout groups, but great question. And Rosie can maybe answer that one. Doug,
yeah,
I know
no,
you've
I'm
got some
happy to.
experience. Yeah,
So they are a membership network. They were specifically set up, and really a focus of their work is on supporting Commission suicide bereavement services in supporting people bereaved by suicide. And so they develop good practice resources. They're very focused on NHS Commission services, but working with third sector organisations and others with expertise such as in, working with the autistic community that feeds into those guidance for Commission services. So they've got quite a specific focus.
So would you say that's more post-vention than prevention?
It's post-vention, and they are part of the NSPA as well. So we work very closely with them.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Can I say, Steve, that I just think that my preference would certainly be, I mean, obviously we're all going to have different approaches, but that this is led by people with lived experience or guided primarily by people with lived experience. And I don't mean by that anybody who hasn't got lived experience should be excluded. But I think there are quite a few organisations out there that still aren't as in touch as they should be with the people who've actually gone through this. And I would say this, wouldn't I? But I think, you've got to have really gone through it to know exactly what is needed in this country. And that's my only thought at the moment.
Yeah, I've noted that, Mike, and I think it was interesting in following the webinar and the feedback that the responses were coming in the main from people with lived experience and the grassroots charities. And so, yeah, I've definitely noted that down and absolutely get what you're saying. So, yeah, I think you can be probably reassured that that'll be a very heavy influence, certainly in this vision. Thanks, Mike. Anyone else got some thoughts? Chooks.
Can you hear me?
Oh, sorry, was that Rob?
Yes.
Yes, Rob, please.
Okay, I was just checking I could be heard. It's not often people can't hear me, I'll tell you. Yeah, just briefly, when I first came across the fantastic work you and Paul have done, I lobbied both of you really to try and get on the famous red couch, and it was thought with the media company you're using at the time, you hadn't got a message that would work in that environment. So maybe not an aim, but a consequence of success in this framework, I think, would be to get you or somebody else sat on that couch. And you see, obviously the couch isn't solely responsible for the success of the 3 Dads Walking, but it's a pretty big part of the success, and other campaigners we know of from your conferences as well have become national figures, both in their influence and in hard cash as well. So, I don't think it's an aim of what you're doing, and I know you to be too modest for it to even be suggested as an aim, but I think success with this framework will be within a year or two, somebody sat on that couch.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for that, Rob. Mike doesn't spend a lot of time on the couch, do you, really, Mike? Yeah.
I know it's a bizarre thing, but I mean, you're quite correct. It does get us out there, and the publicity does us no harm because the publicity has been so positive as well. But I mean, my question to you, Steve, is basically, what do you see the future? How do you see this developing? You know, you're after our ideas, inputs as frame builders, but what is your vision?
Oh, no pressure then, Mike.
No, not at all.
Thanks for that. Yeah, it really is, and I think it's important because I have a clear vision, but importantly, I felt collaboration needed to start from the very beginning, because what I didn't want, and there were 1 or 2 comments after the webinar along the lines of, "Well, it sounds like you've already made up your mind." Yeah, well, I could have just turned up and said, "I think we should have a collaborative network. How do we do it?" I thought, well, that would be a pretty rubbish webinar, wouldn't it? But so there had to be some ideas, and I put the research and put the time in and said, look, here are some ideas, but let's talk about this, because my vision is we would have I really see this. I see, physical and virtual events where people come together, they feel inspired by the events. We just know what that feeling is like when we all come together. It's a special feeling, and people go away motivated and inspired. I know what it's like slogging away at this desk every day.
Can I ask?
Driving the miles. Yeah.
Sorry, can I just,
Alison, yeah.
I feel like maybe I'm in the wrong place because I'm the other side.
The other side?
Well, as in bereavement support rather than.
Yeah.
I don't know what I can.
No, it's Alison, really. I mean, if we look at suicide prevention, and hopefully everyone would agree here, we've got 3 elements really, in my view, to that. There is the prevention element, and by that, the very early stage processes in schools, the kind of work that Nina and Mike and others are doing. We've got the intervention process, where we go straight in and we support someone who's in crisis. But one of the biggest parts of it is postvention support for bereaved people who are at 63% increased risk of attempting to take their own lives. So I would argue, actually, it's definitely one of the most important parts of the process, Alison, is that postvention and bereavement support as part of a network. So yeah,
I mean, I'm happy to throw Alfie onto any sofa because he's used to it now.
Yeah,
I'm sick of the sight of him, to be honest. But we do have connections now with This Morning.
Yeah,
stuff on there. So I know there's a lot of us have been on the red sofa, but there are other connections that we can.
Yeah. But thank you for your humility, but your value would be immense, and Alfie's value in this as well. But yes, Mike, coming back, I just see this as a coming together in a support network for people initially, but also, can we bring people together to work collaboratively on specific areas of suicide prevention? I'll give you one example. I sat with a CEO of a large tech company called Smoothwall. They're part of a larger family of 10 other companies with an Australian head office called Quoria. Basically what they do, they have a program, online computer software program, where they listen in to chats and information within schools. It's massive globally, through America and UK being the biggest markets. So they're listening out for what's going on these conversations online and on school computers. And at the end of the conversation, I said, how well do you know Alison Ripple, suicide prevention? And he said, well, I think I've heard of them. Yeah. I said, how well do you know Ian Russell, Molly Russell Foundation, and the work they're doing? Well, yeah, I think I've heard of them. I said, this is ridiculous. You should potentially all be in the same room together saying, we have these skill sets. Why can't we just collaborate towards the same mission this case, we're looking very much at technology or within schools particularly. So there's a crossover between tech for good and education. So in my mind, Mike, it's getting those individual networking groups as well, collaborating. Just look at education, you know, with people like Nina and yourself and others, that you're all out there doing amazing things, but could we do more collaboratively? Could the power of 4 or 5 of you knocking on a door at Downing Street rather than just the 3 dads carry more weight with Keir Starmer, who'll nod politely and say, yes, we'll do things. And, you know, months later, we're kind of gradually moving, you know, the boulder up the hill there.
I think even at a local level, you know, as you know, you might know, rather, I'm promoting the idea of a director for suicide prevention on the board, and the board on our trust represents 4,500 people, so it's quite a large trust.
And sorry, just for everyone else's benefit, this is the Black Country National Health Trust that Rob's working directly with there, freelance. Yeah. And
in fact, just before I was getting in the mood for this meeting, and I sent one of my, this is like screaming into a vacuum, emails to the board, because when I'm sat thinking about what you're doing compared with what I'm achieving, you know, it's incredibly humbling, to say the least. Anyway, the point of my talking, rather than just talking, is the more I've become well known and got involved with the 4,000 people, I keep unearthing things that actually are recommendations in the book that already exist, if you see what I mean. So something might happen in Warsaw, but they don't know about it in Wolverhampton, etc. And really good people. These aren't, you know, little things. They're big things. So I think it's just occurred to me this last 12 months, really, that even locally, knowing what each other's doing, and people dutifully produce lists and they produce banners and they do all sorts of things. But if we did what you and Paul suggested, which is have a minister for prevention of suicide, which translates to a trust as a director, that alone starts pulling it together, in my opinion. And I suppose that's where I'm putting most of my effort. I've become a governor now of the trust, and I've proposed it as an official budget item for next year, for example. So anyway.
No, thank you, Rob. And just for context, and pity we if we got the full 75 minutes available, I would have gone through everyone's bios, but just briefly, and thank you, Rob, for that. You know, Rob had a long, you know, successful career in UK industry, particularly working with DuPont, which became one of the safest industrial companies in the world. And he was actually approached by London Underground, where they deployed the DuPont methodology for reducing harm within workplaces, and they reduced injuries by 75% in 4 years. So, you know, we're looking at a model, a transferable model, particularly here into suicide prevention. And this is why I wanted to bring different types of people into this discussion, that could help bring ideas in from other industry sectors as well, which I felt was really important.
I don't know what I've done to deserve that. yeah, but Steve, it was the idea of, I mean, I put the idea of you maybe start with a website. You know, you start with that. That means that there are websites out there. I mean, I keep thinking of the NDE, near-death experience. There is a website out there, but it feeds in. It's like an international website. They have conferences, but it all starts from there. It all goes in. They have articles, you know, contact and things. Alison was said about she thought it should start small, maybe regional. You know, we talked about maybe it could be, but one of the main things was it was egos. It was egos. Who wants to be involved? A great worry that not everyone wants to play on the same team almost. You know, whether it's organizations, charities, foundations, there's a lot of people out there and they maybe want to do their own thing. But obviously I chatted with you, maybe you could get a core of people who want to put in, want to contribute, and it would start from there, you know. But yeah, we were very
so almost getting a working model that we can go out and say, well, this is working, this is why it's working. If you want to be a part of this as well, then kind of here are the guidelines, here's the framework. Are you willing to kind of be on board under those kind of circumstances?
I mean,
really?
it could have many sections. You know, you've got the Hub of Hope there, you've got events that are happening, you know, conferences, what you get out there. You have certain sections where certain charities specialize in certain work, you know, like Alfie Squad with you know, post-vention support and things like that. So no, really good. Thank you. I mean, that's a great summing up, and a really, I know, very passionate conversation as well. If I come to Chooks, Anna Gale, Nina, and Mike here, I don't know who's the nominated spokesperson, but just what some of the key things were.
I was nominated.
Well done, Nina. I thought for a moment it might have been Mike or Chooks.
Oh, we could be here quite a while now.
Yeah, you do. No, it was a really interesting conversation. And what came through really clearly was about the importance of this network being able to make connections, so we have more weight to throw behind each sort of piece of the jigsaw, so every people know what else is going on. So you don't feel quite as maybe an isolated voice, because there's, like Steve, you said earlier, there must be different people doing kind of working towards the same thing, and being able to feel heard and feel like you kind of have to shout from the rooftop sometimes to make changes. And we talked about the importance of having a strand of this that is purely for lobbying government, for advocating for those public policies that we know will make a difference. And a big thing about supporting the survivors of suicide loss and those affected by suicide. We mentioned that too. Thinking about sort of that compassionate element of this. Educating the public about mental health and suicide prevention, because they said maybe some of those conferences, you're almost preaching to the converted. It's about getting people that don't know about this and having that education piece too. And maybe even some research, so partnering with universities and having evaluations of some of the wonderful work that's going on, because people are saving lives every day in the communities through these wonderful charities. And it'd be great if that work was known more widely to the public, if it could be then used in government to make some of those changes. But it was a really interesting discussion.
It was, and just picking up on one of the things you said there, you know, about preaching to the converted. I think you're absolutely right, and educating the public is just one piece of the jigsaw puzzle. An activated and educated general public was one of the pieces of the puzzle in the report that everyone contributed to. And I think what's interesting is and coming back to the regional thought just for a moment, is that I'm aware of a number of regional suicide prevention partnerships. Another one in West Yorkshire here and others, and they tend to be quite often led by public health organisation of some kind, and they have lots of other contributors from coming at it from different aspects of mental health and suicide prevention. What I don't see is a collective around, let's say, educating the public. So you imagine you had 8 or 9 people round a table to talk about how do we educate the public, put a plan in place, a measurable plan about how that's going to be enacted, and then feed back the success of that. I don't see that model out there anywhere working at all, and it could be in education the same, or workplaces. So I think, I think you're absolutely right on the money with what you're sharing here. And I know this is a very rapid meeting, but I think already, I don't know, I know you called me optimistic before, Ellie, I suppose we have to be, but I do feel really quite buoyed just by what you've shared here today, because, and it comes back to what Rob said about his conversations with people like Steve Mallam, is if we say yes, which is effectively what you're saying here, you say, yes, this is what we can do. Yes, this is what we can do. It's almost, okay, well, what's the question now? And the question is, well, how do we make it happen? But you've all kind of started with yes today, which is great, in a really short period of time. Chooks, yeah.
One thing that we did say, and I think everyone can concur with that one, it needs to have action. We don't want to do talk. We want action.
The action is absolutely coming back to Mike's question. What do I see? If these individual networking groups are not about action on the ground, then why are we doing it? We don't want more meetings to sit around and talk around a table. Thank you. And Annika, I'll just go quickly because I'm very conscious of time.
I was just very quickly going to say, on adding to what Chick said, I came into this because of your petition, Steve. Oh,
sorry, it's still there.
He's gone. I'll just say
I'm still here. I'm still here. I'm still here.
You're still there. You attracted me, you know, and I've learned so much more, and I've done what I can to support, you know, from a distance. You've attracted me because of the petition, because I read the petition, I read the report, I saw the petition, and I thought, I want to help that. I want to be part of the solution.
Yeah.
You know, so actions attract people, because you go, I can help with that. I can make a contribution to that.
Really good point, and a powerful point, I think, to end that conversation on now. Look, thank you all. In a couple of minutes, a quick roundup. Thank you for the contribution. As always, I came into this session going, oh God, how's this going to work? But for me personally, it's worked really well. And I'm going to ask you afterwards, not necessarily now, but just in a bit of feedback. The next steps really for me are I'll drop you a line individually afterwards and say, look, did this initial session kind of work for you as a starting point for this? You know, what could have been better? That's one of the questions.
Yeah, I'm happy to have a phone call with you, Steve.
Yeah, Mike, however you want to do it. Yeah, I can jump on calls. I can drop you an email. One of the things I will email you with is I've had a number of people that can't attend these sessions. Great people like Tanya Mawaha, for example, and I've sent her just a brief spreadsheet with these questions on for COM-B, and she's just sent a few thoughts, just 3 or 4 lines of thought, but they've been really helpful. But just to get your own maybe personal views on this. And look, I'm not expecting them back next week or anything, but if before Christmas, that'll allow me a little time in between my turkey and my mince pie to kind of look at those and prepare for the new year. Apologies to any vegetarians there. Jordan Legacy, what we'll then do is prepare a summary report of everyone's feedback to put it back to you then. Haven't thought how I'm going to do that yet, but that's what we're going to do. So you can see kind of everybody's views there. And then share that, as I say, with you by early January, with a view to us then perhaps coming back together to say, right, you know, how do we move this forward, or how do we make this work? So in my head, that's the next steps for us all, if that makes sense to everyone else, unless there's anyone